As North Korea was preparing to send troops to Russia to join the front lines of the Russia-Ukraine war, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited Kazan, Russia, from October 22nd to 24th. He was invited by Russian President Vladimir Putin. Xi attended the 16th BRICS summit and had extended discussions with Putin on the situation in Ukraine. Reports indicated that Xi described the relationship between the two countries as stronger than ever. This was Xi's second visit to Russia since the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. His last visit was in May 2023, after which Putin visited China twice, in October of that same year and again in May this year. Recently, there's been frequent interaction among China, Russia, and North Korea, along with escalating tensions between Iran and Israel. These developments are seen as the four axes of evil nations joining forces, posing an immeasurable threat to global security. First, the situation on the Korean Peninsula became tense in early October. North Korea not only destroyed roads connecting to South Korea, but also announced that its frontline troops were ordered to be ready to open fire at any moment. South Korea is also on high alert, with large numbers of troops and equipment deployed, and forces near the demilitarized zone have been authorized to retaliate if attacked. Meanwhile, North Korea has increased its support for Russia. Kirill Budanov, head of Ukraine's defense intelligence, said in an interview with the War Zone that around 11,000 North Korean infantry soldiers are currently training in eastern Russia, preparing to support Russian forces in Ukraine. This intelligence has reignited focus on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Robert Wood, the U.S. Deputy Representative to the United Nations, stated that if reports of North Korean troops helping Russia are true, it could be a dangerous and deeply concerning development. Representatives from South Korea and the UK warned that Moscow might be forced to offer a significant payoff to Pyongyang in return. However, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov claimed that the cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang is not aimed at any third country. In early October, Ukrainian media reported that 6 North Korean officers were killed by Ukrainian missiles in Russian-occupied territories. According to South Korea's National Intelligence Service, since August last year, North Korea has provided to Russia over 13,000 containers of lethal weapons, including artillery shells and missiles. In June this year, Putin made a rare visit to North Korea, where both nations signed a mutual defense treaty. Kim Jong-Un is trying to strengthen the military alliance with Russia by taking actual combat actions, hoping for strong support from Putin if necessary. On October 23rd, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un inspected a strategic missile base and reviewed preparations for strategic deterrence operations. He urged North Korea to prioritize the development of strategic missile forces and modernize its military capabilities. He claimed that South Korea and Ukraine are provoking nuclear-armed states. Secondly, the situation on the Korean Peninsula intensified. China launched the Joint Sword 2024B military exercise near Taiwan, covering an entire island. This took place 4 days after Taiwanese President Lai Ching-te's National Day speech. According to Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense, between October 14th to October 15th, a total of 153 Chinese military aircraft were active over the sea, with 111 crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait. Additionally, 14 Chinese warships and 12 government vessels were operating around Taiwan, amounting to 179 incursions. However, the military exercise concluded swiftly after just 13 hours. Chairman of the Taiwan International Strategic Institute, Wang Kunyi, told Voice of America that China conducted military exercises around Taiwan while tensions on the Korean Peninsula were rising, aiming to link the Taiwan Strait situation with that of the Korean Peninsula. He suggested that this might be a way to test or warn the United States about handling 2 wars simultaneously. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, the U.S. currently has the capacity to fight only 1.5 wars at a time. However, a report from the U.S. Congressional Research Service pointed out that U.S. military officials confirmed that the current size of the U.S. military is sufficient for less than 2 simultaneous or overlapping major conflicts. On October 17th, before heading to Russia, Xi Jinping inspected the Chinese rocket force. According to Hong Kong's Mingbao, Chinese state media Xinhua News Agency did not disclose the specific unit number or the location of the inspected troops. In a 2022 report, detailed information was provided about the rocket force's bases. One such base, located in Huangshan, Anhui, covers operational areas in Southeast Asia, including the Taiwan Strait. Singaporean media Lianhe Zaobao pointed out that footage from China's Central Television (CCTV) showed that the unit was equipped with a new generation of Dongfeng 26 intermediate-range ballistic missiles, which China has been heavily developing in recent years. Analyzing the CCTV footage, the report identified 25 DF-26 missile launch vehicles, with 20 lined up outdoors for inspection and 5 indoors demonstrating the launch process. This suggests that a DF-26 missile brigade has at least 25 launch vehicles. The report noted that each launch vehicle is accompanied by 2 specialized missile transport vehicles, meaning each launch vehicle can carry 3 missiles. Therefore, a single DF-26 brigade can launch over 75 missiles in one strike, potentially disabling 1 or more aircraft carrier strike groups. Political commentator Jian Feng told Radio Free Asia that the DF-26 is not only a direct threat to Taiwan, but also poses a risk to Western assistance, particularly from the U.S. Known as the killer carrier, the DF-26's 5,000-kilometer range covers the Western Pacific, threatening U.S. aircraft carrier groups if they were to support Taiwan in a conflict. Military commentator Qi Le-yi analyzed that Xi Jinping's inspection of the sensitive rocket force as chairman of the Central Military Commission was an attempt to publicly showcase the deterrent power of the missile units, following recent concerns over the force's combat readiness due to internal restructuring. On the same day Xi arrived in Russia, China's military conducted live fire drills in coastal cities of Niushan Island near Pingtan, Fujian, and at Luoyuan Bay Port. Niushan Island is approximately 165 kilometers in a straight line from Taipei and is relatively close to Taiwan's Matsu Islands. Meanwhile, the PLA's Liaoning aircraft carrier group, which participated in the Joint Sword 2024B exercises, sailed north through the Taiwan Strait from the waters near Dongsha, putting Taiwan's military on high alert. The Liaoning carrier group later moved into the Western Pacific to join further exercises, which many interpreted as a show of force aimed at the U.S. What displeases China the most is the transit of U.S. warships through the Taiwan Strait. On October 19th, the U.S. destroyer USS Higgins and the Canadian frigate HMCS Vancouver transited the Taiwan Strait, demonstrating the commitment of the U.S. and Canada to uphold the principle of freedom of navigation for all nations. Chinese Eastern Theater Command spokesperson Li Shi commented that the actions of the U.S. and Canada were disruptive and undermined peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. Meanwhile, the U.S. 7th Fleet stated that their actions were to uphold the freedom of navigation in international waters, in accordance with international law. Reports suggest that as China continues to ramp up its military pressure on Taiwan, the purpose of the U.S. and Canadian warships' transit through the Taiwan Strait was to counterbalance China. Director of the Institute of Chinese Political and Military Operations Concepts at Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, Oh Shi-fu said, "This year, apart from U.S. warships, ships from Japan, Germany, and now Canada have also passed through the Taiwan Strait. This shows a collective action among Indo-Pacific allies." Thirdly, the crisis in the Middle East has escalated, with Palestinian militant group Hamas and Lebanese political and military organization Hezbollah receiving strong support from Iran. After Israel's retaliatory strikes against Hamas and Hezbollah, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warned of a stronger response to any aggressive actions. On October 20th, Iran's Press TV reported that Araghchi warned that Iran has identified all targets for retaliation against Israel. In January this year, Iran officially became a member of the BRICS group at the invitation of Xi Jinping. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian attended the BRICS summit in Russia in October and held meetings with both President Putin and Xi Jinping. The frequent cooperation among the so-called axis of evil nations, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea, poses potential crises for countries around the world. On October 22nd, Switzerland's intelligence agency issued a warning that the growing cooperation among these nations is affecting regional conflicts and crises. The report stated that Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine reminds us of how much Europe's security relies on the United States. The Swiss Federal Intelligence Service noted, "These states want to reduce the USA's influence and are opposed to Western ideas of political order. They are seeking to change the status quo in their respective regions and to establish their own spheres of influence." However, among all the disruptive actions, what likely concerns Xi Jinping the most is North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Xi once noted that his cooperation with Putin was without limits, hoping that Putin would successfully subdue Ukraine and deter the Western world, thereby giving Xi Jinping confidence in his plans to take over Taiwan. Yet, the Russian military did not prove to be as strong as expected, and the ongoing war in Ukraine has left Putin stuck in a prolonged conflict with no clear way out. Now, Xi's close ally Kim Jong-un seems to be overestimating his own strength, preparing for a potential war with South Korea. However, analysts believe that while North Korea has a large military, its equipment is outdated. If war breaks out on the Korean Peninsula, North Korea's forces would likely face defeat. For Xi Jinping, he would prefer Kim Jong-un to continue posturing with military threats rather than engage in actual conflict. If Putin were to fail, and Kim's regime were to collapse, then Xi's ambitions to attack Taiwan would be completely undermined. Experts have pointed out that if Kim Jong-un initiates this war, it could very well derail Xi Jinping's decade-long plan to forcibly reunify Taiwan. On Newtang Dynasty Television's Elite Forum, independent TV producer Lee Jun stated that North Korea claims to have 1.4 million soldiers ready to join the fight and has issued a war warning, stating that if another South Korean drone flies into North Korean airspace, it will be considered an act of war, and North Korea will respond without further warning. North Korea has publicly defined South Korea as an enemy state in its constitution. Meanwhile, South Korea is gathering its military aircraft, armored vehicles, and troops along the border, preparing to respond at any moment. For years, North and South Korea have been engaged in a balloon warfare, with South Korean activists, including defectors, frequently sending propaganda leaflets across the border. This year, North Korea has escalated by sending balloons filled with feces over to South Korea. In early October, South Korea unexpectedly sent drones over Pyongyang at night, dropping a large number of anti-North Korean leaflets exposing the secrets of Kim Jong-un's family. This infuriated Kim, who convened a national security meeting and ordered an immediate military response. South Korea is currently on high alert, but the South Korean military has not confirmed whether it was behind the drone operation, and defector groups have also denied any involvement. Meanwhile, the provincial government, which surrounds, has banned civic groups from dropping leaflets or other materials over North Korea. Under the law, violators face up to 1 year in prison and a fine of over 10 million Korean won. The incident of South Korean drones dropping leaflets was a major blow to Kim Jong-un. It raises the question, could bombs or even a decapitation strike be next? Since Hamas and Hezbollah leaders were taken out one by Israeli drones, war tactics seem to have become simpler, and the idea that removing the leader is enough to win. This has placed significant pressure on Kim Jong-un. Editor-in-chief of the Epoch Times, Guo Jun, stated that while North Korea's balloon warfare may seem absurd to the free world, it aligns perfectly with the political logic of communist authoritarian regimes. For these regimes, military confrontations and economic blockades are not their greatest fears. It's freedom of speech and an open press that truly frighten them. The effectiveness of an authoritarian system relies on absolute personal authority of its leaders. The leaflets dropped by South Korea severely undermine the personal authority of the Kim family, which is extremely damaging to this kind of regime, more so than any guns or artillery. Guo also expressed that she does not believe the crisis on the Korean Peninsula was orchestrated by China. Beijing does not want the peninsula to become an opportunity for large-scale Western military deployment. The Korean War in the 1950s led to China missing its best chance to take over Taiwan. If another Korean War breaks out, Xi Jinping's decade-long plan to reclaim Taiwan could be derailed once again. Observers are also watching whether North Korea's decision to send troops to Russia changed China's stance on the Russia-Ukraine war. Professor Yao Yuan-Ye, chair of international studies at the University of St. Thomas, said that as North Korea increases its support for Russia, Moscow might ask China for more help. However, China is unlikely to actively respond to such requests. Due to issues like overcapacity and its focus on economic recovery, China would not want to antagonize the European Union. Professor Ye explained, "Currently, it's Russia that needs China, not the other way around. Therefore, it's unlikely that China will provide more resources for the Russia-Ukraine war, as losing the EU market would not be worth it. China is also unlikely to openly condemn North Korea. It will probably handle the issue quietly." To effectively counter the actions of hostile organizations against the U.S., the Department of Justice announced new rules on October 21st. These rules impose restrictions on certain commercial transactions to protect federal government data or large amounts of personal data from falling into the hands of China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea. The new regulations aim to implement an executive order issued by President Biden earlier this year. Amid intense U.S.-China rivalry, Australia has not remained idle. On October 22nd, the Australian government announced a $7 billion Australian dollar agreement with the U.S. to procure SM-2 IIIC and SM-6 long-range missiles for its Navy, strengthening air and missile defense capabilities. Australia's Minister for Defence Industry, Pat Conroy, emphasized that the country faces the most complex geopolitical environments since World War II. During his visit to Washington, Conroy said, "It was clear that we live in a missile age. I've been very clear that the best way of avoiding conflict is by deterring any potential adversary, and this investment is part of that." Additionally, the U.S. and Australia are working on upgrading bases in northern and western Australia, which are closer to potential hotspots like the South China Sea. Political commentator Jiang Feng believes that the Western perspective has not shifted its focus away from the Taiwan Strait. The Chinese military's exercises have increased the level of military threats, but instead of achieving their intended effect, they have led to an arms race across the Asia-Pacific region and highlighted vigilance among neighboring countries against China's military expansion. Jiang asserts that if China were to launch a campaign against Taiwan, it would isolate itself, creating a difficult confrontation with a coalition of multiple countries.